A lot to unpack from the attack in the past 24 hours and the political fallout.
That's right. And joining us now, political science professor William Mock from North Central College. William, thanks for being with us tonight once again. 2 weeks left to go before the inauguration here. How realistic are the odds of pursuing an avenue of the 25th Amendment or an impeachment? Let's start there.
Well, I think the 25th Amendment is going to come down to Mike Pence and whether he feels that is in his political interest. Because I think there's the country's interest, but then politicians always think about their own interest. And Mike Pence has to weigh, he wants to probably run for president again. And if he does this to President Trump, does he alienate Trump's base? So I bet that's going on in his head. The challenge with impeachment is time. The House can bring impeachment very, very quickly, but then it has to go to the Senate for the actual hearing. So, the impeachment process could occur within days. It doesn't even have to go through the subcommittee. They could bring that right to the full House and vote on it. The challenge is getting that done and getting a trial done in a certain period of time before he's out of office.
Bill, there are a whole lot of resignations going on, the latest being Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. With only 13 days left, does it really matter? Does it hold any significance?
No, at this point, it really is symbolic. And what you've seen is individuals from within the administration are leaving. Individuals who've left the administration are now criticizing him. I mean, the critique today from Bill Barr calling Trump's behavior inexcusable was really, really devastating. His former chief of staff, H.R. McMaster, the national security advisor, I mean, they are piling on. It's fair to say this is the most difficult 24 hours in Trump's presidency. He's a humbled and wounded political candidate right now, and the sharks are surrounding him, right? They can smell the blood in the water. And so most of this is just symbolic, just to punish him for what he's done.
That video that the president put out on Twitter that we mentioned earlier, a 2.5-minute video, what did you discern from his tone there? Did you see it or read it as sort of self-serving, or was there some sense that he finally maybe understands that the tide is not turning in his favor?
Well, the behind-the-scenes politics would be really fascinating to know. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came to him, some senior Republican leaders, and said, you've got to say this. You've got to acknowledge the transition of power. You've got to condemn the violence yesterday. Now, he didn't apologize for his own behavior and his own role in this, and he still hasn't discounted the false narrative about stealing the election. But it is important. I mean, we should say it's really, really important that he did this and acknowledged that there's going to be a transition of power. And it is a stark contrast to where he was yesterday. So there was some awakening, whether it's authentic. I'll be watching to see what does he do tomorrow. Throughout the last 4 years, there are times where Trump does the right thing, and then the next day he goes back and undermines what he did. So let's see what happens over the next couple days. Even
though there is a short time, can he do anything to harm the U.S. national security right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we need to realize that, the world doesn't stop. There are going to be international crises around the world, and those international actors are going to look to take advantage of this. So we have to ask the question about what is motivating Donald Trump at this point. Is it the country's interest, or is it his own interest? Is he thinking about punishing and vengeance, or is he really thinking about pursuing the U.S. is our own interest? So that's a really, really important question, and he still is the most powerful man in the world right now. So yes, absolutely. That's why I think this matters, and I think conversations about removing him are very, very appropriate.
You talked about the power there, and we've heard a lot of discussion about the president perhaps pardoning himself. Can you walk us through that as we have just a few seconds left?
Sure, this would be unprecedented, right? So I think it's likely that he will try to do that. Now, whether it works or not will depend on the court system. So if he does self-pardon, and then at some point if he is charged with a crime, then it would work its way through the court system, and they would see whether that would hold up or not. And you have all sorts of different interpretations of whether he can do this. It would likely make its way to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would weigh in on whether a president can self-pardon. My guess is that they can't, but this will ultimately be a question that I think the Supreme Court will have to answer for us.
But if he did pardon himself, that would only be from the federal prosecution, not from state prosecution, right?
Absolutely. And there are a number of state investigations that I think he's very, very worried about. So, I mean, part of what might be going through his head right now is thinking about his post-presidency, both in terms of, what does he want to do, and also avoiding all of these legal troubles that are waiting for him. So it's a very heavy time.
All right, Bill Mock, the head of the Political Science Department, North Central College. Thank you, sir. Be safe, be well.